Welcome back, everybody. It's Friday afternoon, and it's time for another episode of Jiles McCoy Live, your spot for tech, hi fi, and gaming. Today is episode 308, and joining us this afternoon is Michael Levy from Alta Audio. Michael, how are you, sir?
Good morning. Doing fine.
Man, it's it's been about a year since we last spoke. I think it was at the home entertainment show in California, right?
Yes, that's right. I remember.
Yeah, and I remember in particular, because I can remember sitting down in the room, and this is before things had gotten going, and you were there with, was it Infigo Audio?
Yes, Hans Luhmann was there with us.
Yes, and I remember standing in the back of the room, and I was watching the two of you, and you both would listen to a piece of music, and you're like, oh, that doesn't sound just the way I want it. It's not just right, and you would do your magic, and then you were like, oh, that's closer, and then one of you would say, well, the bass sounds a little exaggerated here. Maybe we're getting a little room gain, and I'm thinking to myself, don't think I know music the way these gentlemen know music. Um, anyway, but before we get into all of that, I think introductions are in order, right? So, uh, could you take a moment and for the people that haven't met you on the show before, let them know who you are and a little bit about Alta Audio?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Michael Levy, and I'm president and owner of Alta Audio. Alta is the culmination, actually, of my life's work. This is what I wanted to do, um, and frankly, I'm having a lot of fun. I'm loving what I'm doing. I started as a teenager building speakers and went to NYU engineering specifically for, in my mind, to become a loudspeaker designer. My first company was in 1980 and it was Pentagram, and we had some patents and an excellent product. But eventually I moved out of audio for a while and went to home theater, and I was one of the people who helped introduce home theater sound. Um, and yes, I apologize for that because,
No, don't apologize for that. I love home theater too.
but the problem for that is that home theater actually took something away that is into channel. And I love home theater, but I want home theater to have that too. And what it is what we have done in our speakers. And by the way, we will be introducing a center channel, an infrasonic low frequency element, subwoofer,
Ooh,
and surround sound speakers to go with our products, with our two channel products. And they will all come from the same point of view. And that is the point of view that the purpose of a system is to return you to the original venue so that you can be somewhere as if the performance of live natural instruments was happening right in front of you. Like that day you go into your local club and surprisingly somebody that you never expected shows up and starts playing.
So that's a wonderful concept, and we've spoken about that before. And that experience of live is, that's where the magic is, right? Sometimes when I listen to things, it the reproduction of it, whether it's the source material, or if it's the speakers, or the mix of the two, it doesn't sound like you're really listening to the performance. It sounds like you're just listening to the recording, right? But then when you sit down and you hear that magical system where you're like, oh my god, I'm in the room, that it's a wonderful thing. And this kind of goes back to what I was talking about at the very beginning, when you and Hans were tuning the system, getting it ready for the show. You could feel it get incrementally closer and closer to that end game. And then one other thing just came to mind, about listening to music as it is live. Every morning, we get up, and my 11-year-old goes and plays piano, and I've taken to recording that, right. So I can see myself a few years down the road, listening on an amazing two-channel system to this stereo recording of my 11-year-old pecking out, the songs. But I think having the system be of a quality where it really brings you back into that memory is going to be meaningful. So, there are lots of uses for these speakers in ways that people might not anticipate, and that authenticity is super important. Okay, enough of me thinking about the future.
Very
Let's
good.
talk more about the speakers, right? So the products, you carry two lines of speakers, right?
Right. We have the reference line and we have the statement line.
Okay, now the statement line is the line that I'm most familiar with, and I think last year the new item there was the Atom. Is that correct?
That's right. That's what
Okay,
we were
great,
showing when you came to the show and we saw you.
absolutely. So, could you walk through what is specific about that line of speakers and what makes those be the statement line?
Okay. The statement line is making the statement that you can have the feel, the energy of a live performance in your home. Now, of course, this is true throughout the line, but in the statement line, we've done it in a package that is both beautiful. It can be in a home, and you'll find that it will not just look like a piece of mechanics. It is a beautiful piece of furniture at the same time, but it wasn't designed that way for that reason. The design of the statement line is such that it encompasses the right dimensions and shape so that it integrates into a room both visually and sonically, and that it creates the right tonal balance to be in a natural room. So that's what the statement line is about. Our reference line is really, it is what you would do if you took the statement line and said, well, what if we decide that nothing else counts except the absolute level of quality? And that
Okay,
goes by that, by which goes, I have a plaque on my wall about Levy's law. Levy's law reads like this: 10 times the price brings you half the distance between where you are and perfection. And
okay.
the high end is like that. And the reference line is on that basis: price, no object.
Right on. Now there's a new model, right? The titanium Hestia 2. Am I getting that right?
We'll be
Ca-
showing it in Expona coming up very soon. And it is an upgrade of the original Hestia, wherein we have incorporated a new woofer and tuning. We have incorporated an upgraded crossover, which is smoother and has a smoother impedance for the amplifier, so it's easier to drive. And in that crossover, we have used hand and ear chosen parts that are spec'd so that um, for example, Litz coils, um, deoxygenated copper, Teflon shielded, silver coated, multi stranded cables. But in every step, they are done on the basis of both thinking about the engineering and listening to make sure that it is doing what we want it to do. And so sometimes something would, and sometimes something wouldn't. And that's the time and personal involvement to make that product.
Awesome, awesome. I want to dig a little bit into the technology, right? So, one of the things that I noticed when I was first listening to speakers in the statement line was just the crazy bass extension that the speakers had. You look at them and you're like, okay, this will be good, but maybe we'll get down to 40 hertz or something like that, right? But when I listened to the speaker, I was like, what is going on here? So now that is because you have integrated or built around a technology called XTL. Can you tell us what that is? For the layperson, what's going on there?
Well, if you want to put it in terms of things that we know, it is a hybrid of a tuned port and a transmission line, wherein the system converts to a transmission line below resonance. and thus continues to couple to the woofer. When when I was studying engineering, I was a member of the Audio Engineering Society and met with the founders of the technology, the programs everybody uses now to design speakers were
Hmm.
Neville Teal and Richard Small. And I had a question for them because I'd read it and read their papers, and I said, one thing, in a tune port, what happens to the woofer below resonance? And they said, well, it decouples, which means that it moves without creating sound, which is both a loss of energy, creates Doppler distortion. And my question was, why would you want to do that? And the other thing was, of course, that I asked them about loss factors because they had design their design point of view was that you would be putting it in a box and therefore you'd stuff it full of padding so that you would not get standing wave resonances predominating. And once again I said, well, we have loss here that is a nonlinear function. And it, later I tried experimenting and found that I didn't like the sound of padding in the cabinet at all.
Hmm.
So the XTL was the solution to the bass problem. What it does is it couples using a transmission line below resonance so that the woofer does not have that decoupling effect. And when you look at the speakers, not only are they putting out bass you would never expect from them to put out, they do it to very high power and they are hardly moving at all as they're doing it. What? Why? Well, we have a misunderstanding of the concept of what a woofer is supposed to do. Most people, it takes someone who's a designer, an engineer, to really understand that what we're trying to do is transfer one energy into another form. In effect,
Hmm.
a loudspeaker is a transmission line in the pure sense, like an antenna. What does an antenna do? It converts electrical energy to electromagnetic energy. That's what a true transmission line does. What does a speaker do? It converts motion into sound. And
Right.
so when it is most efficient, it's transferring so much energy that it hardly moves at all doing it. And the net effect with an XTL bass is that you not only have this extended bass that goes well into the infrasonics. I mean, you feel it, but also you have um, the woofer not moving, so you Doppler distortion, which is normally caused by woofers, isn't there at all. It's almost non-existent. The effect of not having Doppler distortion in the woofer is that it matches the mid-range and tweeter much better and melds much better. It creates an image that is much more solid. It makes it much easier to make a cohesive image such that a speaker would sound almost like it was a single driver speaker, even though it's a three-way.
Right. And that's the holy grail, right? You don't want it to sound like it's a collection of speakers. You want it to just sound, right?
I wanted to disappear.
Yeah,
I didn't want to
absolutely.
hear the speaker at all. You asked what we were doing when we were listening in that room. What were you listening for? And yes, little things as far as tonality, but the real thing we listen for the most is that point at which we've gone beyond the system into the original recording so well that it's not something we're noticing anymore. We're really just involved in the music, and that's the purpose of the entire design. That's the whole. That's what we want to do.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for that description of XTL and what it does. And what you just said brings up another question that I always find interesting, and I would love to get your point of view on this. So, if you're a person, right, and you're out and you're maybe at a show or you go to a friend's home to listen to their system, and you're trying to understand, what's going on with a set of speakers and whether you like it or not. Now, obviously, a lot of that is going to be your personal preference, but is there anything that you do and think about as you are auditioning a new set of speakers? So, if your buddy said, "Hey, you got to check these out. These are really good." When you listen to them, what are the things that you're looking for? What do you try and hear out of those speakers so that you can judge it in your own way, right? And say, "Oh, I really like that," or "Oh, that's only," what are you listening for? How do you go through that process?
Well, first, I have a list of recordings that I would try to use because
Mhm.
I need to have something I know. I need to know both the original performance and the recording process. So if I know the recording well, I'll give you an example. One of the ones I tend to use very often is Cantate Domino, which is a recording in a church um, that was recorded in I believe, the early '80s, and it's very simple. I mean, you're talking about a couple of microphones and uh, tape, and that was it.
Right.
So the amount that it got engineered was very little, and therefore I'm getting a very good idea of what the original sound should have been. And it is amazing when you listen to it how much you feel like you're in the church. Um, and that's what I want. Once I play that as my reference, and I have many references like this, there's a point in time where actually I have one passage in it that I listen to, which is with a solo that you can hear the shape of the wall behind her. So
Right.
those kind of things, you want to feel very much like you're there. So the organ, when it's playing, it moves you. When she sings, you feel she's there, and you feel the room she's in. That's what it's about.
Gotcha, gotcha. So I maybe to distill that down then, so what you've been able to do is you know what a high performing sound system sounds like, right? So when you listen to these new items, you take the material that you're very familiar with, and that way it gives you a kind of a point of comparison. So you can
Yes,
say that it gets close to what I know is great, or it doesn't, but you're able to do that because you really know that source material well.
what I love is when I'm working on something and I'm playing source material I know very, very well. And then as we progress, there'll be a point that suddenly I hear something I didn't know was in that source material. Um,
Yeah.
and then you're getting there. I'll give you an example. For example, Take Five on with David Brubeck. Um,
Mhm.
and that recording everybody knows is a reference, but most people don't catch the fact that in the middle of the recording on the left hand side there is an edit, and normally you go right past it. It's a very good edit. When the system reached the point, that edit was like, whoa, what was that? It suddenly came through clearly. Um, those are the kind of things I listen for.
Gotcha. Understood. No, that makes a lot of sense. Um, I want to shift gears again, and I want to move into the thinking about the future a little bit, right? And you touched on this a bit before, but what are the big things that people should look for from Alta Audio in the pipe that are coming down? This year, next year, the year after. What does that vision look like?
This year is going to be about us creating the home theater system based on Alta design. And the first product we're going to do is a 12-inch LFE, low frequency element subwoofer.
Hmm.
It will be available both in an amplified and in a passive mode because some people simply have their systems already with the amplifier
Right.
fitted for it. Um, Specifically designed for the purpose of being a low frequency element, because the rest of the speakers in the system all have XTL bass. They go down very low in bass by themselves. They do not need the additional bass. That is simply in the recording there by the original mix down for the movie.
Right.
Now, the one thing that I love, and we've prototyped this, I'm waiting for the actual product so that I can see, but we were listening one night to Inception. Hans Luhmann from Infigo had been visiting here, and we're just relaxing. The day was over, and in the middle of Infigo of Inception, um, there's a point at which they change realities, and to make that audibly, the recording had one of these like that is
Yeah,
like an earthquake, like a truck came by, like an earthquake,
right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, kinda,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm with you. Yeah.
And when it happened, Hans and I looked at each other and went, "Holy crap, that's unbelievable!" I mean, the room moved like a truck had gone by, um,
Right.
and without a trace of distortion, without the rubberiness of bass that a subwoofer normally gives. I recently went to see Avatar, the new one, at
Mhm.
an
Way of the
IMAX,
water. Yeah.
and I'm saying to myself, and we are, by the way, doing a prototype of a pro speaker designed this with an XTL bass, because in listening to that, I said, great, but the bass is subwoofer bass. It's rubbery. It
Yeah.
goes boom, boom, not thump. And the difference is amazing because it's so much more real when the bass doesn't have that signature or any distortion.
Yeah, and so just to talk about, at least from my point of view, bass and home theater, because there are lots of different ways that you can accomplish it. But for folks that are in kind of two-channel world, in home theater world, there are multiple channels all playing at the same time, right? And they have a discrete set of information. There's the LFE channel as well that's designed to play from 120 hertz on down, and it has effects and sounds that aren't in the other channels. When you have a system at home, uh, what happens a lot of times is the speakers that people have don't really have the capabilities to play low. So what ends up happening is they'll take and this is very common. They'll take a point at 80 hertz for all of their speakers, and they cross the speakers over in their processor, their AVR, and then dump all of that information into the LFE channel, which is fed to the subwoofer. Well, that basically it's not decapitating, whatever, debodifying all of your other speakers, right? So they're not playing anything low. And what people don't know is that if you go to a pro studio, that is not the philosophy that they follow. They're like, we want everything full range in all of these speakers. Now, it's more difficult to set up for sure, right? There's a lot more that goes into the room design. But what I like about the story that you're telling here is that if you're using your speakers as the center, left, right, even surround with transmission line, it's possible for those to play down all the way potentially, right? And you don't
You,
have to do that.
you do not need to cross over our speakers, any of them, to go into a surround sound. You can play them full range, which is the way the original recording was meant to be played. And
Yeah.
that LFE will be pulling out the elements that were supposed to be only for it. So the difference is that low frequency element at times is asked to do things like that earth shaking bass that it was in Inception. But your speakers need to do bass in a different way, even though they'll be lined up perfectly using our design. The bass in them is supposed to meld into the thing that they're playing, the vocal or the
Mhm.
instrument, or even the car going by, has its solidity from coming from the same source. So using full range speakers, and all of ours are, will make it so that it'll be much more real. It will sound like the real thing rather than a movie representation of it.
Yeah, so this is really exciting for me because that's the philosophy that I want to follow, and I'm not able to follow that in my home theater at this point fully yet, but that's the goal that I'm building toward, and I can't wait to hear that first theater, Alta Audio Theater, that's 100% designed that way. That's
I
exciting.
will be sending samples to you when they're ready, and I really would like you to hear what it will do, because we will have a new center channel coming out also, in addition to the subwoofer, and we're going to make surround speakers that can be used either as two, four, whatever your system is. Frankly, the way that Alta speakers work, you don't need a multiple speakers because they image off the speakers so well. They don't need multiple speakers to pinpoint the sound. If the sound's supposed to be in a certain place, it will be there, even if you have four.
Oh, outstanding. Yeah, I look forward to that. That's really cool. That's really cool. Um, so, anything beyond that outside of the home theater, anything in the distant future? And I know I might be asking too much because,
No, you're
that's
not.
way out there.
There's 2 things that are, and things, of course, you have a limited amount of time, and you have people
Exactly.
doing all kinds of things. So, one of my dealers came over back when I was just starting to build the Alyssa. And the
Mhm,
Alyssa, very well. It's 14.5 inches high, 14 and a
mhm.
quarter inches deep, 8.5 wide on 9.5 wide on the bottom, 8 inches wide on the top. It's not a big speaker. Well, this dealer is a professional bass player. So, what does a professional bass player bring over to listen to? He
Yeah,
brings
bass
over
music. Yeah.
bass. And one of the recordings he had, of course, had the lowest note on a bass, which I think is 31.5 hertz. All right. And he's playing it on the Ulysses. And when the Ulysses played 31.5 hertz with power and clarity, he looked at me and he said, "You've got to build me a pro version of this. You've got to build me a." He says, "Right now, in order to get that kind of bass and be able to play it in performance, I need something refrigerator size. I want something I can put in my trunk and does the same thing." And so I decided at that point in time to build a pro speaker. That was almost 2 years ago. Now we're building the actual prototype. We got the drivers. We have a new professional ribbon, 6.5 inches long, made for high output, so it won't distort
Oh,
even at 120
outstanding.
decibels. We have mid ranges made in Italy for us that will cover the span between 250 cycles and 2 kilohertz, where the ribbon comes in with dynamics and openness, and they are in their own tuned XTL cabinet, and then a 12-inch woofer. I did the numbers on this, and my computer tells me, but I have to hear it to believe it, that the speaker will be capable of doing, well, it's capable of handling 1,000 watts. At 500 watts, it will be putting out 119 decibels from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz.
From 20 hertz.
From 20 hertz.
Okay, so that's the special sauce right there. So at 120 hertz, that's not so outstanding. That's not crazy, but at 20 hertz, that amount of volume out of a 12-inch driver, that's pretty special.
And it only can be done with the XTL base. If it wasn't XTL base, you'd be talking about the woofer would have the problems again of excursion limitation, and
Right.
would be operating for about 40 hertz on down. So you're going much lower. Truth is, it'll go below 20, um, and with much more control and with far less distortion, all at the same time, thanks to the XTL. So yeah, I'm watching the shop as they're building stuff, and I'm sort of like drooling.
Well, and for folks that haven't seen your gear, and this is a great segue into the next two topics. The gear is beautiful. I mean, I've looked at it very up close and spent time with it, and it's absolutely gorgeous. The craftsmanship is outstanding. I'd look at it, and I'm like, I don't even know how they built this. I don't even know how you put this together. I don't know how you do it. Right? It's definitely an artisan level piece of equipment, and for me that's important. The sound is obviously paramount, but I want something that's nice to look at when I put it in the room, right? Because even the smallest piece of audio equipment is going to be noticeable. So I want something that's pleasant too, and these definitely hit that mark. So my question is, for folks that are like, okay, this is all great, sounds like a wonderful product, how do they actually get to experience it themselves? Is the best way to go to Expona or another show? Are these speakers in
Yes,
dealer showrooms anywhere? how,
the
how do they
answer
how do they
to
see and
both
hear it?
is the answer to both is yes. First, I'd love to see you or anyone at a show, because then you'll get to meet me and I will get to personally introduce them to you. But for example, in the coming Expo, we have 4 different rooms. We have our local dealer, Cinetech, that will be displaying a pair of Atoms. We have our dealer from Florida, who will be also showing the Adams and the Alex. And we have our own rooms, one within Figo, which will have the Hestia 2s, and
Ooh.
with Nexus Audio, which are the people that represent us for sales. And
Mhm.
if you go to our web page, you will find that you can put in your area, your zip code, and get the nearest dealer. Now, we don't have dealers absolutely everywhere, and if not, the phone number is there. Give us a call, and we'll work with you directly in order to get you an audition one way or the other.
And that would be the similar process, or the process as well if you decide to buy. So you would find a dealer. If there's not one local, they can reach out and find out the best way to hear those, and then from there, it would just be the transaction with the dealer to do the purchase. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yes,
Great.
well, I've had people who've called on that basis and decided that they wanted to actually sample the speaker, and I gave them, and they were not near, they weren't near a dealer. As a matter of fact, in some cases, they weren't even in the country. But when they were in the country, what we gave them was a 100% refund policy. We shipped them the speakers and said, if for whatever reason they don't work out for you, just return them and we'll credit you back. Um, and you know, I've had one pair of speakers returned once, and and rooms are different, and things can at times not work in a room. But I also at the same time qualify the customer to make sure the right product is going on the right amplifier beforehand, because I know if I know most of the information, they're going to love what they get.
That's awesome. That's great. All right, our time is, I think, pretty much drawn to an end now. So, in closing, I just want to let everybody know that I've listened to these speakers quite a bit, and they're very good. So, I would really recommend that if folks can make it out to Axpona, and I'll be there, and I'll stop by and say hi as usual. They really should, because it's something special, and your philosophy of making music real, making it live, making it be kind of that visceral experience as opposed to I'm listening to a recording, is everybody wants to accomplish that, but you've been able to do it to a high degree, which is pretty cool. So if you can, folks, get to the show, listen to these speakers. Michael, thank you for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and so everybody out there, thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed. There's also a podcast version of this out there, so if you haven't heard all the shows and you want to listen to them in your car, feel free to look up Jiles McCoy Live wherever you get your podcasts, and you'll find me there, and you'll also find this. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you in the next one.